The drums of mourning echoed through the compound. My husband's body was lowered into the red earth, his name swallowed by chance and dust. My children clung to me, their little eyes wide with confusion and fear. In those hours, I thought grief was the only mountain ahead of me. I was wrong. When the last spadeful of soil fell, I realized I was not only bearing a husband, I was bearing the life I once knew. As a third wife, my place was fragile. The first wife claimed seniority, the second wielded charm and influence. My children and I found ourselves in corners of the compound, eating our meals in silence. Every decision, from who cooked to who slept where, became a battlefield. The compound, once a place of shared laughter, turned into contested ground. The elders gathered beneath the iroko tree. They spoke of inheritance, duties, and respect. But their words fell like knives. Like, who are you? We don't know you. The children stood against us. Land and property were divided. My children and I received little, for they said the lineage must favor the older wives. I left the meeting with trembling hands, wondering how to feed my family. At the market, women whispered as I passed, "That one, the third wife? See how she struggles." Shame clung to me like dust. Yet I forced my back straight, selling plantain powder and dried fish, determined that my children would not go hungry. That night, when the compound was quiet, I wept into my wrapper. My children slept on mats beside me, their small breaths steady. I promised myself then, no matter how hard the world became, they would not see me broken. One evening, my eldest son asked, "Mama, will we still go to school?" His eyes carried a fear beyond his years. I swallowed hard. The school fees were due and the coffers were empty. I nodded anyway, praying silently for a miracle. Children should not carry the weight of adult worries. The second wife accused me of stealing dried maize. Voices rose, hands nearly flew. The children huddled in the corner, afraid. The first wife watched, her silence sharper than any insult. From that day, I realized peace in the compound would never come freely, because I know being a third wife is not going to be easy. It had to be carved out with wisdom and strength. My mother traveled from the village, her back bent but her spirit unbroken. She brought yams and palm oil, gifts of survival. Sitting with me in the courtyard, she reminded me of my father's words. A widow must learn to plant her own shade. Her counsel became a balm, her presence a pillar. I turned to trading with fierceness. I borrowed a small sum from a neighbor and began selling palm oil in small bottles. My children followed me to the market, carrying baskets. Each coin I earned was guarded like gold. Slowly, the shame of widowhood turned into the pride of a hustler. The annual festival came, the compound filled with drummers and dancers, their bodies painted in ancestral colors. Yet, I felt like a shadow among them. Other widows clasped my hands, their eyes telling stories without words. I learned then that I was not alone in this struggle. One night, heavy rains tore through the compound. Our small room flooded, mats soaked, pots floating. The first wife secured her portion with ease, while the second laughed at our misery. My children shivered under thin cloths. That storm was more than water, it was a test. I knew then I had to build a safer shelter, even if it meant starting from nothing. My youngest daughter returned from school in tears. She had been mocked by other children. Fatherless child, third wife's child. The words pierced deeper than whips. I held her close, whispering that her worth was greater than insults. That night, I stitched her torn uniform by candlelight. each thread a vow that her dignity would not be lost. Desperation pushed me to seek a loan. The moneylender's eyes were sharp, his terms harsher. Still, I signed, knowing it was the only way to expand my palm oil trade. My children's future was worth the risk, even if debt shadowed me like a vulture. When my firewood finished, a neighbor's wife quietly slipped me a bundle. "You are stronger than they know," she said. That small kindness lit more than my cooking fire. It reminded me that even in rivalry, compassion could appear in unexpected hands. The elders decided to reassign land, and the first wife claimed the best plots. My protest was silenced with cold stares. "You are only the third wife," they said. Yet inside, a flame grew. If land was denied, I would build my fortune in the market, where no one could dictate my portion. While sorting through my husband's old chest, I discovered a leather-bound diary. Inside were words of love and regret. He wrote of me tenderly, fearing that after his death, the others would mistreat my children. Tears blurred the ink. His voice from the grave became my secret strength. My eldest son began working odd jobs, fetching water, carrying loads at the market. He was only 12, yet his shoulders bore the weight of a man. Watching him broke my heart, but it also filled me with pride. His sacrifices reminded me that we were a team, bound by blood and determination. Rumors swirled that I would remarry to escape hardship. Some men even approached with proposals, whispering promises of protection. I refused them all. My loyalty was not to another man, but to my children's growth. Let the village talk. I would carve my own legacy. My husband's mother came, stern and unyielding. She questioned my choices, criticized my parenting, and hinted that perhaps my children should be raised by the first wife. I held my ground, bowing respectfully but refusing her suggestion. That day, I declared silently that my children would not be pawns in anyone's game. Months of struggle bore fruit. My palm oil trade doubled. I repaid part of my loan and bought new uniforms for the children. The pride in their eyes when they wore them was worth more than gold. For the first time since my husband's death, hope tasted sweet. At the next festival, my daughter joined the dance. Her feet stamped with joy, her laughter rising above the drums. The same villagers who once pitied us now clapped and cheered. I watched her glow and realized survival had transformed into dignity. The second wife accused me again, this time of stealing her customers at the market. Words turned to shouts, and the compound buzzed with division. Yet, instead of shrinking, I stood tall, defending myself with truth. The quarrel showed me I was no longer a quiet shadow. I had become a woman unafraid. My youngest son fell sick with fever. I rushed him to the clinic, heart pounding with fear. Medicines were costly, but I sold half my oil stock to pay for them. When he recovered, thin but smiling, I knew that every sacrifice was worth it. My children's health came before profit. A close friend I trusted betrayed me, spreading lies that I had bewitched her business. Customers avoided me. Pain sliced deep, not from strangers, but from a sister I once leaned on. Yet even betrayal became a lesson. Not every hand extended is meant to lift you up. One day, my eldest son returned with a note from his teacher. He is bright, responsible, and destined for greatness. I cried quietly as I read it. Despite poverty, my children's brilliance shone. That note became my new wealth, one no elder or co-wife could steal. A fire swept through part of the market, destroying stalls. I watched in horror as flames devoured my goods, but neighbors helped me salvage what they could. From ashes, I rebuilt, stronger than before. The fire did not burn my spirit, it refined it. The first wife, once cold, softened with time. One evening, she sent food to my room. "We are widows together," she said simply. That fragile truce eased the compound's tension, showing me that even enemies can turn into allies when survival is shared. After years of saving, I rented a small house away from the compound. It was modest, but it was ours. My children painted the walls with laughter, free from constant quarrels. Moving away felt like breaking chains. I had reclaimed our dignity and peace. Years passed. My son gained admission to a university. My daughter excelled in her exams. They stood taller, prouder, carrying not the label of third wife's children, but the strength of a survivor's. Their achievements were my reward, the harvest of years of pain and persistence. One evening, as we sat under the stars, my eldest son said, "Mama, you gave us more than a father's inheritance. You gave us courage." Tears filled my eyes. I realized then that being a third wife, with all its struggles, had not ruined us. It had reshaped us. From the ashes of grief, we built a new legacy, one carved by resilience, unity, and love. Years later, I returned to my father's village with my children. The paths were narrower, the huts smaller, but my heart was wide with pride. Relatives who once doubted me now looked at my children with awe. They saw not orphans, but promising young men and women. My father's grave became my place of prayer, where I whispered, "I did not fail them." A wealthy trader, impressed by my success in the market, offered marriage. His promises were sweet: protection, wealth, and status. But I remembered the nights of hunger, the tears of struggle, and the vow to raise my children free of dependency. I turned him down, choosing freedom over comfort. When my daughter came of age, suitors lined at the door. One, from a wealthy family, dismissed me as the third wife with nothing to offer. Another, humbler, spoke with respect and kindness. I reminded my daughter that dignity is richer than gold. Her choice would shape her life as mine once had. The day my son graduated from university, my heart nearly burst. I wore my best wrapper, my headscarf tied high. As his name was called, I wept openly. All the insults, all the nights of hunger, all the debts, washed away in that moment. He stood tall in his gown, and I knew we had climbed a mountain. News of my son's success reached the compound. The other wives whispered with envy, their children struggling in comparison. Some accused me of using charms. I smiled through their bitterness, knowing the true magic was sacrifice, prayer, and relentless work. Her wedding was modest, but filled with joy. Friends and neighbors came, gifts of yam and cloth piling high. As I placed coral beads around her neck, I whispered, "May your husband love you without measure, and may your struggles never mirror mine." When she smiled, I saw the woman I had raised, resilient and radiant. The old moneylender reappeared, demanding repayment of interest long forgotten. My hands trembled, but my eldest son stepped forward. With calm authority, he repaid the debt in full. Watching him, I realized my children had become my shield, just as I had once been theirs. Pooling our savings, my children built me a house, not a hut, but a concrete home with painted walls, windows that let in light, and a roof that did not leak. For the first time in years, I slept without fear of storms. That house was not just shelter, it was testimony. At the next festival, elders called my name. They honored me with cloth and kola nut, praising my resilience. I, once the overlooked third wife, became a symbol of endurance. My children stood beside me, proof that grief could turn into greatness. My eldest son received a scholarship abroad. As he boarded the plane, tears streamed down my cheeks. "Mama," he said, "everything I become will carry your name." I held on to those words like treasure, knowing distance could not sever the bond carved by struggle. From across the ocean, letters arrived, pages filled with stories of new cities, strange foods, and dreams unfolding. I read them aloud to my younger children, their eyes wide with wonder. Those letters reminded us that the world was larger than the compound, larger than grief. But life was not without trials. My health began to falter, aches in my bones, weakness in my legs. My children noticed, urging me to rest. Yet I could not stop working. I feared that if I paused, the fragile structure I built would collapse. One relative, sensing my weakness, tried to seize my new house. He forged papers and brought elders against me. But my children fought fiercely, bringing proof and defending my name. That day, I learned blood does not always mean loyalty, but love can build stronger kinship than blood alone. My younger daughter graduated as a teacher. On her first day of work, she returned home in her new dress, her head held high. "Mama," she said, "today I stood before children as a guide. You taught me to rise." My eyes filled with tears. Her triumph was my harvest. Years of quarrels with co-wives mellowed into silence. Age softened sharp tongues, and grief united us. One evening, as we sat together, the first wife said, "We fought, but truly, we were all just trying to survive." I nodded, feeling decades of rivalry dissolve into quiet understanding. News came that my eldest son had married abroad. The bride's family sent pictures, her beauty glowing even across distance. I missed being there, but I knew life had carried him into a wider world. When he called, he said, "Mama, you gave me wings." Widows began visiting me for advice. They asked how I survived betrayal, hunger, and gossip. I told them, work with your hands, guard your children's dignity, and never let grief chain you. My story became a lantern for those walking in darkness. Grandchildren arrived, tiny hands grasping mine, laughter filling the compound. My children's children called me Mama, the strong one. In their innocence, I found joy I thought had been buried with my husband. Love had not ended. It had multiplied. At the final festival I attended, drummers played songs of endurance in my honor. Villagers bowed as I passed. I, once mocked as the struggling third wife, had become a matriarch. My children held me steady as I danced slowly, my heart light. One evening, under the same stars where I once wept, I looked at my grown children and grandchildren. My eldest son said, "Mama, your story is not one of sorrow. It is a story of victory." I smiled, my spirit full. Being a third wife had once felt like a curse, but it became the furnace where resilience was forged. Our lives, scarred but shining, were proof that pain can shape greatness.
If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and don't forget to subscribe for more content.